Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a story today that blends history, legend, and a very human longing immortality.
It's a really enduring theme, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're talking about Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, and his quest to live forever.
And what makes this deep dive so fascinating is the range of sources we have. We're talking ancient texts like the records of the Grand Historian, but also folklore, myths, all those amazing stories passed down through
It's
generations.
like a historical mystery novel, you know?
Mm.
Trying to separate fact from fiction or maybe fact from embellishment is all part of the fun. But to get started, let's talk about Qin Shi Huang himself. He unified China, built the Great Wall. Talk about ambitious.
Right. A powerful ruler achieved incredible things.
But he couldn't escape the one thing none of us can: time.
And that's where the story gets really interesting. Imagine you've got absolute power, you've achieved all your goals, but you realize it's all going to end. What would you do to hold on to it all?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think. What lengths would you go to?
And especially during the Warring States period in China, which was a time of intense conflict and change, immortality was a very appealing idea.
It's not just about living longer, is it? It's almost like this ultimate power move.
Definitely. And the idea that immortality was achievable, that wasn't some crazy fringe belief back then. It was pretty mainstream, especially in those coastal states like Yan and Qi.
So, like, even rulers were buying into this.
Oh, absolutely. We know that King Wei and King Xuan of Qi, they were both fascinated by the idea of eternal life. Think about it. Constant threats to their power, internal and external. The chance to break the cycle of life and death and rule forever. It's pretty tempting.
Makes sense. So how does Qin Shi Huang get drawn into this world of sorcerers and quests for immortality?
It seems the turning point was his tour of those former Qi territories. Remember, that was a place where these beliefs were really strong.
Ah, so that's his exposure.
Exactly. It's during that tour that he probably encounters figures like Song Wuji and Shan Menzigao. These weren't just, your average fortune tellers. They were sorcerers, claimed to have mastered this way of the immortals, these techniques for transforming yourself, becoming a divine being.
So they're like celebrities, attracting huge crowds, influencing powerful people. Imagine the buzz.
Oh, absolutely. They taught about achieving a divine immortal body, and people were fascinated.
Wow, it's amazing how influential these ideas were. Okay, so Qin Shi Huang sees the appeal, he gets exposed to these beliefs, but he's also a pragmatic ruler. What convinces him to commit to this quest for immortality?
Well, the sorcerers had a pretty good hook. They talked about these three mystical islands, Penglai, Fangzhang, and Yingzhou, where the secrets to eternal life were supposedly hidden. And get this, according to them, these islands were somewhere off the coast of the Bohai Sea.
Hidden islands, secret knowledge, I can see the appeal. But was that enough for Qin Shi Huang? He seems like he would need more than just stories, right?
Well, there were all these stories, even back then, of people who claimed to have seen the islands. They always seemed to be just out of reach, shrouded in mist, or storms would drive them away. It's like those islands were a symbol of immortality itself, this tantalizing but always just out of reach goal.
So how does he go from hearing these stories to actually launching an expedition?
He needed someone to make it real. And that's where Yu Fu enters the picture. He was a sorcerer from Qi, and Qin Shi Huang picks him to lead this expedition to find those legendary islands.
So was it like a small team, a couple of ships?
Oh, no, no, no. Think bigger. We're talking thousands of boys and girls, craftsmen, supplies. This was a huge undertaking.
Hold on. Thousands of children. Why so many?
There are a few theories about that. Some believe it was about child virginity being considered pure, like spiritually pure, necessary for a sacred mission.
That's interesting.
Others think Qin Shi Huang had a long-term vision. Maybe he wanted to establish a whole colony on these islands, a society of immortals.
So it wasn't just a search for a magic potion. It was like he was searching for a new world.
Exactly. Whatever the reasoning, it shows how dedicated he was to this quest.
Wow. Yeah, it really does. Okay, so Yu Fu sets off on this epic journey. What happens next?
Well, this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Because according to the records of the Grand Historian, Xu Fu comes back from that first voyage.
Oh, so he finds the islands?
Well, not exactly. He doesn't come back with the elixir of immortality. Instead, he comes back with an incredible story.
Okay, now I have to hear this. What's the story?
He claims he met a divine being who refused to give him the elixir. And the reason, get this, Qin Shi Huang hadn't shown enough respect. He even described seeing this amazing divine mountain filled with strange plants and a figure that looked like a dragon.
Wait, so after investing all of this, Qin Shi Huang gets this story? That's unbelievable.
It's quite a tale. Right.
Did anyone actually believe this? I mean, come
Mhm.
on. It sounds like a pretty convenient excuse for coming back empty-handed.
Well, remember, these accounts were written years, even centuries after these events supposedly happened. It's hard to know what really happened and what's been embellished over time, which is honestly part of the intrigue, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
So what was Qin Shi Huang's reaction to this story? Did he believe Zhu Fu?
It seems like he did, at least to some extent.
Really? I would think he'd be furious.
Maybe. But ultimately, he sends Yufu on a second voyage.
He gives him another chance.
More than that, he gives him even more resources and, yep, you guessed it, another 3,000 boys and girls to take with him. It's like he's doubling down, hoping this time Zhu Fu will come back with that key to eternal life.
Wow, that is some serious dedication. So this second voyage, does Yu Fu ever return?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? And that's where the mystery deepens.
So Zhu Fu sails off again. Even more resources, even more children. It's hard to imagine what those families must have been going through, right?
Yeah.
Sending their kids off on a voyage like that with no guarantee of return. Do they believe in the mission, or do they just, I don't know, have to obey the emperor's orders?
It really makes you think about the human cost of these grand ambitions, doesn't it? And it highlights the power Qin Shi Huang had. But as for what happened on that second voyage, well, that's where things get even more mysterious. Some accounts say Zhu Fu landed in this place described as a vast plain of marshes. And get this, he decided to just stay there. Declared himself king.
Wait, what? He just went rogue, ditched the emperor, and set up his own kingdom. Okay, that's definitely not what I expected. Is there anything in the historical records about this?
Well, we have to be careful with the sources here. Remember, we're talking about events that happened centuries ago. The earliest account, the records of the grand historian, doesn't mention this whole King of the Marshes thing at all. It just says that Shu Fu went looking for the islands and eventually came back empty-handed.
So where did that whole story come from then? Is it just like a later embellishment?
It's possible. Later texts, like the records of the Earth's borders from the Tang Dynasty, talk about this place called Dan Prefecture in the East Sea. It's described as being populated by Zhu Fu's descendants, which suggests that he settled there and started his own community.
Okay, but that's like centuries after Qin Shi Huang, right? Is there anything solid connecting Zhu Fu to this Dan prefecture?
Admittedly, it's mostly speculation at this point. It's folklore. But the records of the Three Kingdoms also mentions Dan Prefecture. It claims the people living there trace their ancestry back to Zhu Fu's followers. There's even a story about generals being sent to find this place during the Three Kingdoms period, but they only came back with a few hundred indigenous people from somewhere else.
So it's like a historical puzzle. Some pieces are missing. We know Zhu Fu led these expeditions, but his ultimate fate is shrouded in, well, myth and speculation. You know, for a long time there's been this theory, it's pretty popular, that Zhu Fu actually landed in Japan and that his followers were like the ancestors of the Japanese people.
Yes, the Yufu Japan connection. It's definitely a captivating story, isn't it? But while it's a fun idea to think about, we have to remember that even if Xu Fu did end up settling somewhere in the East Sea, he wouldn't have been the first Chinese person to reach Japan. You know, there were already indigenous people there, and there's evidence of Chinese people migrating to Japan way before Qin Shi Huang.
So this idea that Zhu Fu and his crew were like the founding fathers of Japan, probably more fiction than fact.
Most likely. But the fact that the story persists, that says something about how powerful it is, right? It's a testament to our fascination with these larger-than-life figures who, dared to challenge what we know, to venture into the unknown.
For sure. It's the kind of story that makes you want to dig deeper and see if there is any truth hidden in all those layers of legend. You know, we've been so focused on Xu Fu's expeditions that we almost forgot something important. Xu Fu wasn't the only one Qin Shi Huang sent out to search for immortality. Didn't he also send other sorcerers and envoys on similar missions?
That's right. Remember those other sorcerers, the ones who were all trying to get the emperor's attention? He sent several of them on quests, too. Names like Hanzong, Hugong, Shisheng, Lu Sheng. They all pop up in the historical records. Each of them was tasked with finding some piece of that immortality puzzle. It seems Qin Shi Huang wasn't putting all his eggs in one basket, so to speak.
It's like he was hedging his bets.
Yeah.
Sending out multiple expeditions and hoping that at least one would find that secret to eternal life.
Exactly. And that shows just how obsessed he was with cheating death. He had all the power and wealth anyone could want, but it still wasn't enough. He wanted to rule forever, and he was willing to put immense resources and people into achieving that goal.
It really makes you wonder, Did he actually believe these sorcerers? Did he think they could deliver on their promises? Or was he just desperately clinging to hope, deep down knowing that time was running out?
That's a question historians have been debating for centuries. It's a question we all grapple with, in a way, isn't it? What would we do if we were in his shoes?
It really does. It makes you think about what you'd do, if you had that kind of power. But did Qin Shi Huang, with all his power and ambition, ever find what he was looking for?
Well, if we're talking about literally finding an elixir of immortality, then no, he never did. In fact, he died fairly young, only 49.
That's almost ironic, isn't it? He spends years searching for a way to cheat death, and he doesn't even make it to 50.
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox, isn't it? But even though he didn't achieve physical immortality, he did achieve a different kind. His legacy as the unifier of China, the builder of the Great Wall, the emperor who dreamed of living forever, that's endured for more than 2,000 years.
True. He's definitely one of the most famous, and I say most intriguing, figures in Chinese history. And this whole quest for immortality, it just adds another layer to his story, shows his ambition, his curiosity, but also maybe just a very human fear of death.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this story so fascinating. It goes beyond time and culture. We might not be sending out expeditions to find mystical islands anymore, but the desire to live longer, healthier lives. That's something we can all relate to, right?
Totally. I mean, look at all the advancements in medicine, the transhumanist movement. People are still trying to extend lifespans, push the boundaries of what's possible. In a way, we're not so different from Qin Shi Huang, are we?
It makes you wonder, what if we actually achieve that? What if we find a way to radically extend human life? What would that do to society? Utopia? Or would it just create a whole new set of problems?
Now, that's a deep dive for another time. But I guess for now, where does this leave us with Qin Shi Huang and his quest for immortality?
Well, we've looked at the historical accounts, the myths, the mysteries. We've seen how his ambition and maybe even his anxieties drove him to do some extraordinary things. And while we might never know exactly what happened to Zhu Fu and all those people he took with him, the story itself, it
Yeah.
continues to capture our imagination.
It's a reminder that we all share this very human desire to push our limits, to leave our mark on the world, and maybe, just maybe, to conquer death itself. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there, on some hidden island, shrouded in mist, the search for immortality continues. But that's a deep dive for another time. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring.